Okay, so if you're watching this, it's because I'm having some connectivity problems this morning. I have been able to follow along with a few sessions or a few papers in the session so far, but I thought it better to record this just in case. Our paper is basically about efforts to make the most of fieldwork that was cancelled as a result of the pandemic. And I'm speaking today on behalf of my co-author, Kleist. She's unable to join us because she's in the field. But we co-direct a project in Northwest Greenland together with Naotaka Hayashi. And there's a series of students and community partners that are really behind the work that we're talking about today. 2020 was supposed to be a really big year for our project. There were all kinds of logistical arrangements and other time-sensitive kind of aspects of the project that were ruptured by the pandemic. But one of the most significant challenges was in keeping continuity with the collaborative framework that we've established with the community. And so the pandemic basically forced us to address something that we think probably a lot of other Arctic projects have some challenges with as well, is that there's this persistent problem with kind of the physical separation of the campus and the field. And so we challenged ourselves to run a digital season with the goal of developing some new pathways for knowledge co-production that overcomes that physical separation. So our project has been working in Northwest Greenland since 2016. It's an area where there's been a lot of different generations of great archaeological projects and different forms of community collaboration in the not-so-recent past, too. And in our project, we're specifically focused on ecological relationships with something called Pikkulisorsuaq, which is the North Water Plinia. It's this large expanse of year-round open water that you can see in the image here. It's a really ecologically important area, but one that's also very precarious. And in the present, it's subject to a lot of different consequences of global climate change. And those direct impacts of climate change have a significant influence on daily life. But one thing that we don't often consider that does have bearing on the purpose of archaeology in a changing North is the indirect effects as well, and the consequences of different types of global attention that converge on the area. It's a region where there's a lot of imposed regulations on how the community uses the environment. And there's a complex relationship behind this between the community and researchers. In many cases, different disciplines that do research there collaborate with the community on one hand, but then on the other, mobilize the outcomes of research to have impact in policies. So a lot of these problems are outlined very nicely in a document that I'll refer your attention to, which is the report of the Pikkulisorsuaq Commission. Pikkulisorsuaq Commission was organized by the Inuit Circumpolar Council. It was basically created by representatives from both Greenland and Canada, and it consisted of extensive consultation with communities that surround Pikkulisorsuaq. And two of the key concerns or recommendations that came out of this have a lot of bearing on archaeological work. So the first is that they advocated for a need for locally controlled regulatory frameworks that are built from existing community structure. The second point is a little bit more ambitious too, which is the need for free movement and use of both sides of the Plinia. The community can't make a lot of conservation decisions in terms of how and when to intercept different species as a part of their life cycles and respond to some of the changes that are taking place, partly because they're limited and constrained in terms of how they use the Plinia as an integrated whole. So in our project, we're focused on how archaeology, and specifically archaeology's perspective on the long term, can be mobilized to contribute to some of these efforts. And one of the things that we've found is that there's a strong sense already within the community of what archaeology can achieve and how it can be combined with community knowledge and current efforts towards local autonomy in ecological decision making. So one of the things that really helps, I think, is that our research team is partly composed of Greenlandic researchers and students, and on top of that, Naotaka, our co-director, is also fluent in Greenlandic language, and so we're able to interact with the community primarily in Kalaallisut language. There are some dialectical challenges within Greenland, but in general, this sort of opportunity to communicate in Kalaallisut does open up a lot of opportunities for enthusiastics. Now, the importance of community partnership, of course, has seen a lot of discussion in Arctic archaeology over the last 30 years, and many of the participants in the session have written extensively and talked about this in their own work. But one of the key challenges that we face, and we suspect other projects do too, is that there remains this separation of the field and campus that has important impact in the character of collaboration. And specifically, it tends to reinforce traditional domains when it comes to things like interpretation. So we challenged ourselves to create a digital season over the summer of 2020. And the idea was to try and use online platforms to erode the campus field divide and bring community members closer into the interpretive processes that typically fall more in the academic domain. So we figured, kind of in this rush to online collaboration, to teaching online, to kind of communicating with research partners, things like that, we might be able to transpose some of those new digital fluencies that everybody's learning into attacking this particular divide and making some progress with this. Now, of course, there's some key challenges that a lot of Arctic communities face to do with connectivity that prohibit that type of remote collaboration. That's one of the reasons Marie can't join us today, because she's actually in Qaanaaq, and the internet connections there are not fast enough to participate in things like Zoom or online presentations. Most community members access the internet through smartphones over basically phone networks. They have unstable connections that can sometimes go out for days at a time, and they also have limited data plans as well. And so if we were going to kind of collaborate with them online, we had to kind of choose a format that is going to be fairly accessible from those considerations. And so it was with some trepidation, because it's not a particularly unproblematic platform, but we decided to use Facebook education pages as a way of conducting the digital field season. But there were a few advantages to Facebook that did kind of help our purposes. First of all, it allows for sharing of posts. It allows you to present a range of media in low data and compressed formats. And it also allows participants to look at this on their phone. They can either comment publicly or privately, and the Facebook group tools also allow us to kind of get a glimpse into who exactly is using the site and some of the varied forms of participation, which is an important part of assessing the project as well. So we organized the digital season around a couple of themes, and these are particular areas where we're developing interpretations that started in the field, but then depend on a fair bit of background work from the campus side of things too. So the first one is the importance of the ice edge in community history, and how the community specifically apprehends change through some of the key events that took place at some of those archaeological landscapes that we're working at. The second theme was about the deep historical relationship between the community and certain species, and we decided to focus on apat, or thick-billed murre, which are kind of the subject of a lot of controversy in Greenland right now in terms of the regulation. And then the final one was the extensive damage that's taking place in the area to archaeological landscapes as a result of climate change. Something that I think probably most people working in different parts of the Arctic are quite familiar with, but what we wanted to kind of get out of this is a sense of how to prioritize those efforts. If we can't save all of the different archaeological sites, how can we develop a prioritization framework that doesn't leave kind of choices about what's important entirely within the academic realm? So in total, over the course of the summer, we put out 81 vignette posts, mostly on time. And there's a couple of examples here. They involved a combination of things like audio clips from interviews, a variety of different GIS maps, and different excavation drawings and stuff like that. So the management tools for Facebook are kind of a bit strange. They use a lot of language that's directed more at things like advertisement campaigns. So you'll see some weird language here, like our fans and things like that. But they do kind of give us an opportunity to get a glimpse as to different forms of usership, and that this was kind of important to us as a way of forming some preliminary assessments in terms of how the field season was going. What we accumulated over the summer was 816 followers. These are people who have subscribed, so they're requesting that they'll get new feeds from us or new information from us in their feeds. 60% of those were women, 39% men, according to what they'd entered into their Facebook profile anyways. And the average reach per post, this is kind of people who are viewing them or seeing them through a variety of different ways, was 455. Some posts were much more popular than others, and the average engagement per post, this is things like whether they react to it with these thumbs up and things like that, or if they put some comments in or share it, or kind of direct other people to the post, was 62. So within Greenland, the distribution of subscribers is kind of interesting. So between Qaanaaq and Sirapaluk, we had about 89 subscribers. So we're dealing with communities that are very small, 640 in Qaanaaq and 43 in Sirapaluk. And we reckon, kind of by looking at the profile of who those people were, that were basically making contact with, somewhere between a third and a half of different households in the area. The vast majority of participants from Greenland, though, were from Nuuk, and there's, of course, a larger kind of audience there. It's the capital city, higher speed connections, and a lot of people with different educations in, historical sciences or environmental sciences that intersect with heritage in some way. And then a variety of other users from different communities. So we were a little bit worried that if there was kind of a domination of discussion from users in Nuuk, that it might kind of suppress a willingness to participate in the group from communities in Qaanaaq and Sirapaluk. But very early, one of the things we realized is that a lot of the most active participants from external areas were actually Inuit members who have moved to different communities for a variety of different reasons. Maybe it's getting work, or through family events like marriages, things like that. And so there was sort of a segment of the Inuit community that we don't normally get a chance to interact with through things like field seasons that were able to participate as a result. So in terms of an assessment, we're mostly quite happy with kind of the overall scope of what happened. Some of the goals we're not quite satisfied or are complete and see as a work in progress. In terms of the presentation side, I think that we reached a lot of people, and that was very kind of, very happy to see that. Certainly within the communities that we're focused on, Qaanaaq and Sirapaluk, there, connectivity still remains an obstacle. We also had some issues with timing and overlap with the hunting seasons, so a lot of people are leaving the communities for specific events, if there's muskox close to town and things like that. But in general, we got a lot of positive feedback and appreciation from a variety of different people all over Greenland about primarily around the language and kind of style of access that was there. In terms of the engagement itself and what we wanted in terms of people being able to, affect changes in the way that we interpret some of the archaeological materials being presented, we would say that that's still a work in progress. A lot of these posts were shared. There was discussion around that. There are a few instances where engagement and comments would alter interpretation, and especially around things like prioritization of sites under threat, which we're very happy to see. But we would say that probably most of the comments tended to be kind of simple comments about kind of generally appreciative ones. That's a great photo, or, thanks for writing this in Kalaallisut, or I really liked hearing about this, that kind of stuff, which we take as encouraging, but, it doesn't quite alter the way that we assemble some of those things into, an archaeological interpretation. So in terms of eroding that separation between the campus and the field, we're still a long ways from doing that. And there are a variety of different follow-up features that are in process to try and develop those further. One of the things we did find is that there was a lot of collateral benefits, how we would describe these. So there's led to new opportunities in Avanarsuak, a lot of opportunities for students to do different types of work and have different types of contact with the community. And we got a lot of invitations to participate in different kind of classroom settings through remote participation as a result of the kind of attention on this. As well, I think some of the skills that we built in kind of learning how to run an operation like this have had benefit too. One of the things that's happened in the background this year is that University of Calgary and University of Greenland have signed an exchange agreement for grad students. So you can take courses on both campuses if you're taking a master's or PhD. And both Mari and I were teaching Arctic archaeology on both campuses this last year, and we had students basically doing presentations and group work across the different campuses as a result. So certainly connectivity and access within kind of more remote communities are about to change with different types of innovations in terms of satellite and 5G, things like that. And so we anticipate that some of those things that we're able to do with students in Nuuk, for example, they might be on the horizon in terms of how we interact with community members in Avanussuaq as well. So for now, it's sort of a work in progress, and we do anticipate we'll get some more insight doing this summer if field season is again canceled. Anyhow, bye for now, and looking forward to hearing the rest of the presentations.